What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. A special day for multiple reasons. We have three special guests on, and it's also Super Bowl Sunday. And since we're live, Carm, any predictions? Because people will be watching this and the game will be over. Who are you picking in this
Today
game?
I made a prediction if it's a boy or a girl for a question, and that's the only prediction I'm making today.
That's it.
Yes,
Do you know who's even playing in the Super Bowl coming up?
yes,
Who?
because I looked it up. Don't you do this to me.
Moving right along with the show here.
And one is Philadelphia.
And who's the other one?
See, now I am
You're wearing red. Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City, and they're playing in Arizona.
They're playing in Arizona. Very good, Carm. Very good. Well, what's your gut telling you? Who's going to win? Just give us a gut prediction. So when people watch,
Kansas City.
that's a good call. They're the best quarterback in the league. But moving on here to more important things, STS Nation. There was a woman named Lee Mariano. She was buried 30 years ago, this coming March 7th, in East Providence's Olivet Memorial Park. Her daughter, who you're looking at in those tortoise-shelled glasses, is Lee Malloy. She always believed her mom died from natural causes because the medical examiner ruled that Lauren's mother had died from such a thing, from natural causes, a heart disorder to be specific. So case closed, or was it? But now, 3 years ago, a woman reached out to Lauren online, seemingly out of the blue, and suggested that someone had killed her mother. So the mystery grew at that point, seemingly out of nowhere, as I said. That interaction with that stranger that Lauren will tell us about drew Lauren into her mother's case and pulled her into an avalanche of police reports, death certificates, medical examinations, investigations, and even threatening men. And her life turned sharply. And last year, after receiving lots of persistent questions from Lauren, authorities in Rhode Island told her that they would re-examine her mother's 1993 death and that they intended to exhume her mother's body, which they did a few weeks ago. So the question now is, will Lee Malloy's mom's death be reclassified as a homicide? Our best guests are here to break it all down, including the woman at the center of all this, Lee Malloy. Thank you, Lauren. As well as Cheryl McCollum. She is a crime analyst, college professor, author, and founder and director of the nonprofit Cold Case Investigative Research Institute based in Atlanta. And of course, we're also joined by my lovely mother. Quick notes. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS. You can follow me personally at Joel Waldman if you want to get my UFC predictions. And please support us on Patreon. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube. And as my 8 and 7-year-old daughters like to say, please hit that subscribe and like button. So, Lauren, your mother's name was Lauren Lee Malloy, is what you go by. She died March 7th, 1993, but she was married at the time of her death to a man named Mariano. So that's what some people refer to her as. Just kind of set the table. Tell us a little bit about your mom. I know you're calling this Operation Dog Sled. Why that name?
Oh gosh. So first, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity and grateful to be here. And thanks, Mac, also for joining and for being a very valued member of Operation Sled Dog for the last couple of years. I don't think I would have gotten this far without your support. So thank you. To give you a little bit of background on my mom's nickname. So she went to Alaska, Anchorage to be specific, when she was in her mid-20s. She was following a guy who, his nickname was Pirate. I've actually found him along my journey, and I consider him to be like family. He was the love of my mom's life. And he gave me the background to this nickname that she had on the back of her photos with him and that I'd heard other people talk about. So when she went out to Alaska to go see him when he was stationed out there for a job, she got into sled dog racing. There was an Iditarod winner out there who, just like to have all these different sled dogs around, and she somehow got into mushing, and they all made fun of her and laughed about how, oh, you're like a sled dog yourself. So they just started calling her sled dog or slutty. And that sort of stuck with her throughout her life. Yeah.
So sled dog and slutty, those are cool names. Are you an animal lover yourself?
Oh, yeah. I've got one of my dogs is sleeping in the background over here. He might interrupt us. Another one's sleeping in the living room. So I've got two for now.
Yeah, I'm a huge dog lover, and my beloved Mabel Rose just passed away at 17. So but we've got Ethel, who might be barking in the backyard as well. She also loved alligators, which, being that I live in Miami, I'm not a huge fan. Always worried that one will appear in my pool at any given time. But on to kind of the specifics sort of surrounding your mother's death. Again, back in March 7th of 93. Your mother had a sister named Allison, who's your aunt, obviously. And several days before that, Allison had taken you into her care at your mom's request. Do you know why?
So it's not 100% clear because we're going off of, at this point, Allison's statement to police. And, certainly some things have changed since 1993. I will preface this by saying I am estranged from my aunt. We do not speak. I wish her well, but for purposes of this case, I'm curious to learn what the actual circumstances were surrounding my spending some time with her. I do know that the weekend prior to the weekend my mom was found, so this would be February 26th, 27th, 28th, around then, I was with my aunt and her then boyfriend, Richard, who, after my mom passed, ended up adopting me several years later. They were able to get custody of me. I don't 100% know why I was there, and we also don't exactly know if I was returned to my mom's care prior to when she was found and may have been removed from the scene. That's still a little unclear.
So just taking a quick half step back, and then we're going to get Mac into the conversation too, as well as Carmela. And I mean this in a very positive, upbeat manner, but you seem super well put together, super well adjusted. You had a lot of tragedy in your life. I mean, your mother obviously died 30 years ago from what you thought was a heart condition, which does not seem to be the case now.
She was only 18 months old.
You were only 18 months old, as Carmela is pointing out. And then your biological father, he died in a car crash in 2009. And there was allegations that he was kind of abusive to your mother. And then the person that your mom was married to, this guy, Harry Mariano, which we'll get into, his nickname, all you have to know was his nickname was Scary. And he ended up in the prison system. So how are you so seemingly normal? We never know what's really going on, but I assume you're pretty normal. Why?
So I don't think I'm normal at all. I think I'm such a weirdo when you get to know me. And I think you got to be a little weird to look into things like this. But I will say I have done a lot of therapy. And that's like, pure honesty. I really credit some great grief therapists over the years and also a really strong support network. I always encourage people, if you have the means and resources, seek professional support, because I had a lot of anxiety. And especially, growing up, I didn't always know where that came from, but the more that I learned, the more I started to understand my own unresolved traumas and, just getting into a pretty strict, disciplined exercise regimen. And also, like I said, just being really open with people and relying heavily on my support network has been huge.
I know where my anxiety came from.
Yeah.
I won't mention any names.
Listen, I take it because all the good things came from me too.
When both your parents are therapists, my dad is a retired psychiatrist. She's a retired social worker and a Holocaust survivor. You cannot end up normal.
That's how I dealt with life. I married a psychiatrist. I had the health right there.
Trust me, you cannot. But this is not about me. We'll do another show about me.
Either.
Zen Amen writes, "Hello, Lauren. I'm so proud of you looking into this case and seeking justice for your mother. It was a murder, and if it was a murder, and it certainly sounds like it was. And that's what this is all about. This is all about justice for Lee Mariano. But you refer to her as Lee Malloy, right?
I do. And actually, I can give you the reason for that. My mom can give you the reason for that. This is her 1992 planner. So going back to December 28th, Monday, December 28th, 1992, she had her final hearing for divorce from Scary Harry Mariano. And she writes, get baby's name cleared to my name, Malloy. And she underlines that and says divorced and full custody. So that's right there for everybody to see. Her divorce was granted December 28th, 1992. She was found deceased on Sunday, March 7th of 93. And a couple of weeks later, I want to say it was the beginning of April or the end of March, her divorce was finalized. And that's when my family was able to print a correction in the paper for her obituary to have it reflected as Malloy.
And we've got a comment here from Verbal Judo. Yay, I finally caught Alive. I found you 3 weeks ago. I'm glad you found us. Carm?
No, I was wondering if this ledger that you have there, if this is the one you found in a bag in your mom's.
Yes, I found all three of these, her 1991, 1992, and 1993 planners, which were really like her journals. I mean, she kept detailed notes every day for the most part. Even on my first birthday, she writes, it says here, 1 year old, Lauren's birthday, happy birthday, my one and only, I love you till death. And that was 6 months prior to when she did pass. So, I mean, she certainly left me a lot of clues to follow. And it was kind of incredible that we were able to find those and buried underneath trash bags in my dad's basement.
So, Mac, you obviously know Lauren, because when I reached out to Lauren, you were on the emails, and you're basically a cold case expert. How did you guys come to meet? Let's start there.
Well, we met over social media. She had posted several stories about her mom, and specifically there was one picture that I was just kind of drawn to. It's her mama leaning on a yellow car, and she's kind of giving the thumbs up, and she just looked like this cool chick that you would just want to know. And one of the first questions I ever asked Lauren, ironically, was, did your mom have a nickname? She appeared to be the kind of person that people would befriend easily, and she would have a nickname that would, kind of generate part of her personality. And Lauren said, that's so funny that you would ask that. She did. And from that moment forward, we just both felt like Operation Sled Dog was on.
So that was the name, Sled Dog, that she told you.
Yeah,
or
no question. And let me say one thing about Lauren, if I could, before we go any further. She is remarkably kind to everybody. She has not asked me like for specific help only for her mama. She has reached out to me on several cases of mine that she sees on social media. And she's done this thing where she takes a photograph and she can make it clearer and better. Or she can do like an age progression for folks. And several of the family members of my cold cases have really just been touched by that. And by proxy, they've kind of become connected. And now kind of this friendship has built of support. So she's just an extraordinary person. It's not like she only wants her mama's case to have highlight. She highlights everybody's, which to me says a lot about Lauren.
Yeah, I read that. I don't know her well enough yet to vouch for that, but I did read about it, and I believe everything I read. So it says that she is She is helping a lot of people, which we're definitely going to get into. Starting,
I have a question.
Go for it.
The question is, what you do with the photographs, that you can take a photograph of a young person and kind of project that they will look, what they would have looked when older, if they would have been alive. Is that what did you learn this skill? Didn't I read somewhere, or is this just my fantasy, that you are a private investigator, or you have a degree or knowledge?
So I'm a member of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Rhode Island. I'm actually the secretary of the group. They've been around since 1998, so it's kind of the oldest and most well-respected group of private detectives in our state. I am not licensed yet. I do work underneath licensed investigators, but I'm still waiting for my license to be approved. I have to prove that I have substantial equivalent experience to law enforcement. That's kind of the joke at this point. As far as the photo enhancements and age progressions go, a lot of that is for just through apps that I've had subscriptions to. And when you combine different ones, you can do an age progression and you can also refine things. I have some skills in Photoshop, so I'm able to edit some of the little blemishes. And it's just, I don't know, for me, it's always like this tiny touch that I can do to try and help bring awareness to a case, and especially with like cold case missing persons. You know, somebody went missing in 1980 or 1990. They're going to look a lot different today if they're still alive. So I always find that helpful to do.
Carm, we can send Lauren a photo of you and see what you'll look like in 20 years.
Yes.
when I'm 123.
Yeah.
You'll still be beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
In that Southern accent. I love it. So let's fast forward and then we're going to rewind. So the exhumation, that is a word, I believe,
Yes.
was done just a couple weeks ago.
February 1st.
February 1st. Tell us, you basically in so many ways kind of petitioned the state by raising the awareness, and then they went ahead, and I know you were checking your mom's grave site to see if it had been, touched and if it had been done. And then you found out, like you said, February 1st, she was in fact removed from the cemetery for further analysis. So where are we with regards to the exhumation, and how did that come about?
Great question. So it took several years and a whole lot of people supporting it. I started a petition on change.org to get the case reopened and get her exhumed and get the investigation redone. It took consulting with an expert pathologist to give a second opinion that the autopsy needed to be redone, and getting today's chief medical examiner to also say it needed to be redone and that she did not die of natural causes. So once we had all of that proved, I just kept pushing the state and insisting on, I'm not going to let this go until we know what happened to my mom. We didn't know when she was going to be exhumed. The motion was granted in November of last year, early November. So it was sort of a waiting game after that point. I was at her grave site, I want to say a week before she was exhumed. And they'd already done a site survey. I knew that they'd been out to the site, but still didn't know when it was going to happen. And then the afternoon of February 1st, I got an email from the Attorney General's office, and I kind of had to do a double take and just sit down to read it, because it said, your mother was exhumed this afternoon. She's going to undergo a forensic examination and testing. It should take several weeks. So at this point, we're still waiting on those tests. I know that should take around 4 to 5 weeks. So we're looking at early to mid-March. We should have more answers, which ironically is, right around the same time as the 30-year anniversary, which is pretty surreal to me.
Yeah,
the 7th.
Yeah, the 7th is the 30th year anniversary. Mac, to you, since you work on cold cases frequently, how often is someone actually exhumed to be examined? Is it a rare occurrence?
It is rare, but it's powerful, because again, there were some things done the first time that don't make any sense. She died of natural causes. It was heart disease. Then he says, but the heart was unremarkable. Well, both of those things can't be true. And then he says there's some bruising, but he doesn't describe them good enough. In other words, do they look like fingerprints on her thighs that were grabbed? Is it a, does it look like a weapon was used to hit her with something? We don't know. And then he says, well, there's no marks around, the neck or the throat at all. Really? Because you said the heart was unremarkable too. So we don't know a lot. And so this one, I think, is going to give a lot of information for law enforcement. Is the hyoid bone broken? Is there DNA under her fingernails? Is there anything that he can see that was missed before? And I think it's going to be something pretty extraordinary for her.
Well, one of the things that worked for Lauren was the fact that the doctor, the pathologist who examined her then, was this part, not this part. What is the term?
He lost his license. That's yes, ma'am.
License
in 2 states.
Pardon me?
He lost his license in 2 states.
In 2 states, for not long after he did these examinations.
So now that we're there, actually, before we get there, Mac, real quickly, you were talking about fingernails and the hyoid bone. That's a bone that's usually broken when someone is choked to death or strangled. Mm-hmm. How much can you learn about how someone was killed 30 years after the fact?
Well, you can learn a lot. Again, you may have some visible injury that was missed before. You could have damage to bones. You can ascertain a lot from, they keep talking about hair. Again, there could be some, evidence of past, injury that were maybe not even documented, maybe was unknown to people. Did she have a broken bone? Did she have injury to her, jaws or her teeth? We don't know that from the original autopsy. There's a lot missing that I would like to know, that I know Lauren would like to know, that could show pre and post behavior. That's not unusual at all. But again, to me, the money tree is going to be what's under her fingernails.
Also, the science has advanced. One thing I learned from listening to these developments of other cases, that science has, in leaps and bounds, the last 30 years, it's not the same pathology that was then, or the same forensic testing.
Listen, I can give you an example. Her mama got a protective order. When you get a protective order, you have to go before a judge and swear to some facts that you are saying, this is the reason my life is in danger. And it's usually action that's overt. Somebody has punched you, stabbed you, tied you up, beat you. Again, those past injuries could be relevant. If we never knew she had a broken arm, if we didn't know her hip had been dislocated, all those things are going to tell us, oh my word, there was a whole lot of things missed here. And this case comes down to, for me, the totality of it. It's not just the door was open and there was some bread around her. If you say, okay, there's slices of bread around her, but there's no bread in her stomach. There's 2 glasses. They've got those glasses. I can tell you without doubt, if there's a fingerprint left from that night, it's still on those glasses if they were preserved correctly. Fingerprints are still there.
We're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this now, because most people don't know about this story. By the way, shout out to Copper Horse, who retweets all my links, so thank you. But we mentioned your mom's sister, who you say you're estranged from, Allison, but there's some important details here. She tells police that your mother was feeling sick and that you, the baby, had been acting up. Your aunt also said that your mother was using cocaine and she'd been treated with medication for depression. By the way, when Lauren was 5, you were adopted by your aunt and her boyfriend. Do you consider them your parents still, Lauren?
I consider my adopted dad my dad. He passed in 2019, but he was my best friend. He was the best dad I could have had. Allison is just Allison. I don't really consider her much anymore. I certainly thank her for the role that she played, but at the same time, I keep her in the back of my mind as this case moves forward as somebody who I'm interested in.
What's up, Georgia Diving Recovery? A new sub here. Thank you, everyone. Please do hit that like button. It will help us, and my daughters will be thrilled. So back to this guy, Harry Mariano. He was married to your mother at the time of her death. His nickname was Scary Mariano. He also went by Johnny and the Gambler, which gives you a little bit of an idea of who he was. He also happened to be doing time at the adult correctional institutions in Cranston, Rhode Island. And he had written some letters to your mother at that time, around that time, in handwritten notes, at times saying he felt like another man, like a lucky man. And then in another note at one point, seemingly acting, from one end of the extreme to the other, saying that he wanted to punch your mom out. This obviously was important because it could have shed some light on their relationship. Your mom accused him of beating her. The issue, though, was he was in jail or incarcerated at the time of your mother's murder. So obviously, it could not have been him. Over the next 15 years, he was charged on multiple occasions with other women. He died in 2003. Did you ever know him?
No, thankfully, I never knew him. No regrets about that one being found.
Yeah. And so again, he passed away, but was apparently abusive. So, someone at the ACI, the jail, the prison, vouched for all this, and then said, a man directed East Providence police to your mom's apartment on the day of her murder. So this is interesting. Another man now directs the police, saying that your mother was dead. I shouldn't say murdered because we don't know yet. Based on his inability to make contact with her, and this man said that he had planned to marry your mom at one point. What do we know about this person? Who is this guy?
So I will say I've spoken with his family. He did pass some years after my mom did, and he was, by all accounts, a good man. He was a veteran. He was known as very generous, sometimes to a fault. People would take advantage of that. According to his family, he loved my mom, and she was really, kind to him, loved him as well. I think they had a little bit more of a companionship than, your typical romantic relationship. He was quite a bit older than her, but he was there for her, and he was also there for me. Our final 6 months together, he had purchased the turkey and turkey dinner for us for our final Thanksgiving when the church decided she was not needy enough for a free turkey dinner. And he was there with her, through a lot of different things. So in reading the police reports and in speaking with his family, I know some folks have looked at it and said, oh, well, his actions are a little bit suspicious that final week. Why is this guy involving himself? I saw it as this was a man who couldn't get in touch with my mom. He'd known her for quite some time. He felt that something was wrong. He tried to, knock on her door. He tried to call her. He called around to her different friends. He went to visit my Aunt Allison several times and asked for help, and she was sort of shrugging it off the whole time. And then on that final Sunday, he went to her home. He was let into the house and noticed the door was open, took a couple steps in and said, something's really wrong here, and went right to the police department. He didn't have a phone on him. This is before the days of cell phones, but he went right there and said, hey, I don't know the actual address, but follow me and I'll take you there. And when he went inside, the responding officer noted that he was behind him, and he said, oh my God, when he saw the body. He then spoke freely with police. He did not ask for an attorney. He gave them answers to every single question. He was very forthcoming. So to me, just studying, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but just looking at his actions, his behavior surrounding her being found, I don't get that he was, in any way exhibiting signs of someone who was guilty.
No, I
Matt?
think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no motive that anybody can come up with for him.
Right.
He certainly wouldn't have gone to the police station and literally walked back with them. I don't see anything that points to him at all, especially the other things that were done there. It just doesn't make any sense. The refrigerator being unplugged, it doesn't make any sense. Who would do that?
Now that's that refrigerator being unplugged.
Mhm.
I thought of that's to me a mystery.
What did you make of that, Carm?
Somebody said they wanted to move it to the door, and that's why they unplugged it. But that
There's some very strange things we're going to get into here. So
yeah,
Julia,
the crime scene was very strange.
so Julia H is commenting, I am glad to hear you had your dad as a source of love and belonging among so much instability. You seem to have a lot of resilience. That is
Thank
for
you.
darn
Yes.
sure. And then Alexia, hello from Coventry,
Yay.
Rhode Island. Thank you so much for covering this. Of course. So this person, back to this guy who basically told police what where to go. He, like you said, I think he recalled or says he recalled using cocaine with your mom that prior to this, and then warned of another person who was going to come into contact with her, a woman, and identified her basically seemingly out of the blue back then, that she just kind of was planning to visit your mom, and then this woman comes into your life much later on. So is that correct?
Question on that. Correction, rather. He had identified someone who he said was my mom's cocaine dealer. He said that it was a man who he'd seen going into her apartment as he was leaving one day. This person was and is still friends with the woman who found me some years later.
Oh, okay, so that is the connection. So,
Yep.
So tell me about this woman. Who is this mystery woman? How did she reach out to you? When did this happen? And what did it lead to?
Yeah. So August of 2020, I was, enjoying my blissfully ignorant life, thinking my mom died of heart disease, and I got a Facebook message, which I hadn't noticed right away. It went to my filtered folder, and I read it, and it was from this woman, and she said, hi, is this Lauren Lee Malloy? Your mother was Lori Lee Malloy. You had an Aunt Allison Lynn Malloy from East Providence, Rhode Island. And that was really weird to me because, not a lot of people really knew about my family background. I didn't really talk about it all that much. So I said, who is this? How do you know the family? I didn't want to say exactly who I was. And she just kept asking me again. And I was like, you got to give me something here. Who are you? And she sent me a picture of my mom. And it was my mom on her wedding day to Scary Harry. And that was weird to me because nobody had those photos. It was a very small private ceremony. So how did she have them? She then sent me a picture of my mom in her younger years. And something kind of clicked for me because my mom had a picture of her. It was the only picture she had with like an adult friend, her with this woman. And on the back of it, it said, me and this woman on our way to a busy town. So I sent a picture of that picture to the woman and said, do you recognize this? And she said, yep, me and your mom on our way to New York City. I'm like, oh, that's your busy town. So I was like, all right, I'll bite. So we got on the phone with each other and we spoke for 5 hours that first night, which that in and of itself was a little interesting to me. She said how she'd always wanted a daughter and she'd been my mom's best friend since they were in middle school and all these other things. And she's like, no, everything that you know about your mom's death is a lie. She did not die of a heart disease. She was murdered. And it was like, what? So the next day I went, I was going to the gym with my best friend and I said, hey, I got to tell you this really crazy story. And I told her and she's like, what street did your mom grow up on in East Providence? And I said, and she goes, oh my gosh, My whole family lived on that street. Like, you can't make this stuff up. And she's like, let me ask my family if they knew your mom and if they know who this woman is. Like, just don't say anything more to her until we know. Well, her family came back and said, stay away from that woman. She's dangerous. We knew your mom. Your mom was awesome. She was a sweetheart. Like, just be really careful. You should go to police. So we did. We went to police the day after that because I said, let me just get this on record that this is happening and see what I can find out. Because I knew that on my mom's original death certificate, under the cause of death, at first it had said pending. That was then crossed out and they wrote hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is like this rare incurable heart disease. Well, as soon as I explained that to the officer I spoke with, they were like, sounds like there was an investigation. You're going to have to go through this whole process to get records and yada, yada. And I was like, okay. And that kind of started this whole thing.
And what's her name, this woman's name?
Have you revealed this person's name or do you keep it quiet on purpose?
Oh, yeah, I'm keeping it quiet on purpose. I mean, number one, she hasn't been officially named as a suspect or anything. And number two, from everything I've been told, she likes to sue people who name her. So I'd like to not give her any reason to sue me for naming her. But she knows who she is. I'm sure she's going to watch this episode as well.
Well, hello to the mystery woman. And you have an open invitation to come on here and talk about it. But so going back to March 7th, 93, which is when your mother is discovered dead in her home. And by the way, Lauren, do you still live in the same town? Are you still in East Providence?
No, so I'm still in the area. I don't live in East Providence, but I did get to speak with the original downstairs neighbors, the folks who lived the floor right below us when my mom was found, which was interesting.
And somehow you escaped that funny Rhode Island accent too. So it's good for you.
I know. It comes out when I'm mad. You hear it, but
by the way, we're getting Super Bowl picks here, Carm, from
cool.
Sassy Nana 72. Super Bowl, Philly wins 37-34. We'll see if you're right. And then Lil Bit, who's a friend of the show, she's rooting for Philadelphia, but Lil Bit, the Phillies are the baseball team, not the football team. That's the Eagles. So I'll give you another shot next week here. So March 7th, 93, responding officer comes in, and certain aspects of the death scene really concerned this police officer, and he cited these issues in his report, calling them suspicious conditions. But later, as we discussed, the medical examiner rules that your mom died from natural causes, a heart disorder. So we go back to this police officer, Antonio Brito was his name. By the way, have you made contact with him?
I have not. I do know he has been contacted. I don't know the details of that, but
so he's still alive and he's around somewhere.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
I hope he's not still an officer over 30 years later, but who knows?
I think he did I know. I hope he's retired by now. I do think he did his best back then.
Yeah. So he, in this report, observed at the scene that the front door to the third floor apartment where your mom was found was open. So the third floor doors open. And then it gets weirder. Another condition he cites relates to human hair. Small tufts of Lori's hair were all over the apartment. Some pieces of hair were wrapped around her left hand and around one foot. Another officer observed that a large clump of light brown hair was inside a sneaker, and it looked like it had been pulled out of someone's head. Mac, that's got to make your hair stand up. Speaking of hair, that is 100%. Not a normal thing to find, right? And
100%.
Listen, to some people who are young, 1993 seems a lifetime ago, but I graduated college in 1991. So it wasn't that crazy. I mean, we had law enforcement. People knew what to do. Mm-hmm. How could this go, Mac? How could this basically go unnoticed for 30 years, Mac?
Well, here's the first thing that tells me this crime scene was moving. She was moving. It didn't just happen in one place. It's not like she opened the door and was blitzed and was killed and that's it. She's moving from room to room to room with whatever is happening. So that to me is critical. So you've got a door that is open. I'm assuming that's when the person left, if we're talking about a homicide. The neighbors, somebody had to buzz this person in. This wasn't a house you could just walk in and go to every apartment. There were 3 apartments in this one house. Each level had a different apartment. Lori's on the 3rd floor. So this person not only had to get buzzed in, they had to traverse 2 other floors to get to her place. So there's a possibility of being seen, coming and going, being heard, coming and going. And so this sounds, again, if you take the totality, there's some things we don't know, but I'll tell you what's important to me. Not just the responding officers worked this as a homicide, but when they brought the detectives over, they did as well.
Mabel, who's a friend of the show, and it's a running joke because that was the name of my beloved pup that died. So Mabel has a special place in my heart. She says, never heard about this case before. I hope it can be solved. And that is exactly why we're trying to shed some light on it. There's only a few amount of cases that really get in the spotlight compared to what's actually going on out there. So hopefully we can help. And then we've got Wilco joining us from the Netherlands. So moving along here with this police officer who responded, the officers noticed that your mom was also in the bathroom, naked and bruised, with the faucet running and slices of bread laying around on the floor as though, I don't know, someone was eating or feeding pigeons. I don't know what was happening. But Mac, again, I mean, none of this is adding up. I mean, so 30 years later, where do you start with this? Obviously, we've got the exhumation, but how do you work backwards in time to get where you need to be now?
Well, the one thing is, I think Lauren's already said it beautifully. Lori has given you in this time capsule of a backpack, not 1, but 3 ledgers. And I can remember my own mama, she kept a calendar very similar to that. They were diaries. So she wouldn't just put dinner 7:30. She would put Valentine's Day dinner with Vic. We're going to the Swan Coach House. I mean, she would put it so specifically. She would put things about us, not just, going to the elementary school. She would put for what program. She would put why she was going to the high school for all of us. So that to me is a money tree. One thing I noticed, ironically, she wrote Wonder Bread for some reason on one of the things. And then when you go back to the bread being around her, again, there was nothing in her stomach that she had been eating. Even though there's salad supposedly on the table, there's none in her system. Well, who did she give the salad to? There's 2 drinking glasses. I mean, they're not painting this picture that she was alone in that apartment on Saturday night. They say that there's brown liquid in her stomach. Well, be specific. What does it look like to you? Does it look more like coffee? Does it look like liquor? Does it look like bile? I mean, tell me what you're seeing. That's what his job was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Rebecca B. So Many Books writes, Cheryl McCullough, Mac is the best. I follow her work. She is brilliant. Followed by...
Thank you, Rebecca.
Followed by... Hey, don't tell us you know them.
No, I don't know her. I wish I did know her.
James Rawley writes, very happy to get your story out to the public, and hopefully it leads to an arrest. Let's hope so. So the other thing, obviously, go ahead.
I just have to pause really quick. Jim Raleigh is the president of the Rhode Island Canine Search and Rescue Team here in Rhode Island. It is an all-volunteer canine search team. He trained under Sergeant Matt Zarella, who really brought canine searches to Rhode Island, and he does a lot of incredible work. I keep him in the loop on all the missing persons cases I support locally. So, Jim, thanks for joining.
Yeah, love canines.
Jim, shout out to you. Anyone who works with dogs is a friend of mine and a friend of our show. So,
and listen, I just want to say something for the record. I really don't know Rebecca. I was genuinely saying thank you to her. I don't know who she was.
Even better then. Even better.
Yeah,
so.
Yes,
that was sweet of her.
Sense of humor.
Yeah, even
as in ill.
So very important to this whole story. the report, the ME's report, which came back, and we heard all this talk about cocaine use, but the toxicology test did not detect any drugs in a routine screening of Lori's blood and other specific tests for banned substances, including cocaine. It just did not detect these drugs. And there was just no heart issue. Rhode Island's acting medical examiner, Dr. Alex Cherkoff, telling Lauren that the medical description in the autopsy report did not support his own conclusion on the cause of Lori, her mother's death, the heart issue. Carm, your hand is raising.
I would like to ask if either of you, if you think that the crime scene was handled properly.
So I think that East Providence police sort of did the best that they could in that moment. I think the problem really came into play once, because they were waiting on the autopsy results. They had everything in evidence. They had an investigation that was sort of half-baked, and they could have easily probably closed this back then, if not for the ME who totally ruined everything and got it all wrong. So I don't blame them for that. I think that they had a really good start and they were on the right track, and it's just unfortunate.
The medical examiner is where the wheels came off this thing.
100%.
Again, the police, the detectives, the first people on the scene are telling you this looks like a homicide. These are seasoned people that know what they're looking at. What they're waiting on is for the medical examiner to say, yes, it's a homicide. Now the chief of police can say, all of y'all go work this homicide. Well, when that didn't happen, a lot of times the chief says, stop. You don't have a homicide. What are you doing? Right? So again, the totality, you don't have to look any further than the refrigerator. So let me just say this. In order to unplug it, you got to remove the whole thing. You got to pull it out. Could she even physically do that, first of all? And if the answer is no, stop right there. There was a man in that apartment then. And for the person that made the theory that maybe they were going to push it to the door so you couldn't get open, he couldn't do that and leave. So I don't think that was the reason. I think it was his reasoning, whatever it was. We know she struggled to make ends meet. So was it just meanness? I'm going to unplug this thing so all of her food goes bad and she can't eat. I don't know. I mean, it could be just that simple.
STS Nation, get questions in for Mac and Lauren while you have them. Why do you think, Lauren, that refrigerator was unplugged? I mean, what's your theory? Do you have one?
So I originally was thinking, well, maybe you moved it to block the door because, while you're taking your time to do whatever and, stage the scene or something like that, maybe while this guy's banging down the door, trying to find out what's going on with my mom. But I do lean more towards what Mac is saying. Maybe this is somebody who just did it for the heck of it, or maybe they dropped something underneath the fridge and it slid underneath and you're trying to get it. Who knows, like an ID or something like that. I mean, there's so many different things it could be. But even just the fact of, she was on welfare. She did that first week in March. She got her welfare check. That was noted in the original police reports. She went and had a full fridge full of groceries. So at some point she went out to get groceries and fill up that fridge. It could have just been somebody being really spiteful of, I know you're counting pennies and you need to feed your daughter and yourself. So good luck with this now.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. So I've got to mention the great state of New Jersey, where I was raised and where I'm from. So there's now a medical examiner involved from Bergen County, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
Whose name I will sort of try to pronounce, Zhangzu Hua, Dr. Zhangzu Hua. And he, I guess, also wrote a written review agreeing that the cause of death was not supported by the description. How does he come into play? Who is this guy?
So someone totally random who just saw my mom's case on Facebook reached out and said, hey, my dad was murdered years ago and the original autopsy was all wrong. I reached out to this medical examiner and he was able to totally change the game for me. You should reach out to him, tell him I sent you and see what he says. So I called him. It was like, hey, Dr. Hua, here's who I am. And I know this is random, but will you take a look at my mom's case? And he said, yeah, send over the files. And he got back to me about a week later and he said, the original cause of death it's not supported by the autopsy observations. This needs to be reinvestigated by police. And it's, highly doubtful that the actual cause of death is going to be the same as the original one. And one of the things he noted was the weight of her lungs. Her lungs weighed more than twice the normal amount that your lungs should weigh, indicative of something irritated her respiratory system. And that interests me because one of the items that was taken into evidence was a pink, quote, mucus-covered bath towel. Mm-hmm. So to me, that sort of says, well, if you have this woman in her apartment, you want to keep her quiet. Well, maybe you put something on that bath towel and you cover her face with it. And the second she breathes in, well, immediately that's a respiratory irritant. And that could account for that extreme swelling and that reaction that you see.
So, Lauren, back to you. When this mystery woman reached out saying, I don't think your mom died the way they say she did, I think maybe she was murdered. How did your life change then? I mean, how often were you going down this rabbit hole? And did you physically have to go to the police department to retrieve files? How does that all work? I mean, if someone wants to go through this process,
yep.
How do you even know? There's no manual on this. How do you begin?
Yeah, we're sort of writing the manual now. I'm working with Jolynn Rice from Cold Case Advocacy and a few other folks to write a how to reopen a cold case guide that we're hoping to publish at some point soon. And that would be a reference for families and law enforcement. To answer Anita Ray's question, what state did this happen in? I'm not familiar, but would like to be. This happened right here in Rhode Island, East Providence, Rhode Island, to be specific. And the process that I went through at first was we had what was called the Rhode Island Cold Case Unit, which was really just one office, one detective from one local agency. It was not state supported. There was a little bit of a task force, but it's not what we really need in this state. Like many others, you'll see an AG sponsored cold case unit that's funded and has all the resources they need. So I reached out to this one and said, hey, here's my mom's case. Can you help me? And she said, I'll reach out to the medical examiner's office and see if I can get the death certificate. You reach out to the Office of Vital Records and see if you can get her birth and death certificates on your end. And I'll see about the autopsy report. Well, she was unsuccessful. It was at the height of COVID in 2020. So a couple months later, she's like, I got to refer this back to East Providence. They have jurisdiction. I followed up with them myself and started meeting with the detectives and kind of pushing them, but there was nothing that they could do because the state had closed the case. And once the state closes a homicide investigation and says it's natural, then the fight's on. You really have to push to get it reopened. So what I had to do was get my mom's autopsy report from the medical examiner's office, which is the only good thing about her case being closed is I was able to obtain that because it wasn't an open investigation. Once I got that, I went through it myself. And even though I'm not a doctor, I can Google some things and I can ask some questions and realize, this doesn't add up. And I then met with the medical examiner and he said, chief medical examiner said, I refute the original findings. He said, frankly, it's all bullshit. And I was like, okay, what do we do now? And he said, get the state involved. So I went to the Rhode Island Attorney General's office in the criminal division, and they assigned it to a prosecutor who quite honestly didn't really do much. He kind of looked at it and didn't think there was enough there to move forward, sat on it for some months. At the same time, I continued investigating. I re-interviewed people. I kept speaking with that strange woman who found me and recorded her for informational purposes. I kept checking in with the police. I kept trying to dig up documents, found my mom's journal, started piecing together this timeline and researching. And, after a while, a little bit of a picture starts to emerge. And then eventually we started getting more community support. And finally, last November, the state agreed, okay, we have enough here. We're going to push the state to, we're going to petition to reopen the case and exhume her. And they did. And that's where we're at now.
Carm, what do you think of Lauren Lee Malloy's tenacity? I mean, just to hear this, because I spend a large part of my time whining. She spent most of her time really getting proactive. What do you think of this?
Acting, no, it's remarkable, and
Thank
you have to admit it's energizing, and it's basically the right thing. You did the right thing, not only for your mom, but for yourself also, to come to the bottom of it, and
Amen.
I mean, you never mourned her because you were too little
Yeah.
when she died. I'm more or less the same thing with my father, but who died when I was 4.5. But it's still a loss, a tremendous loss that leaves a big hole in your life. And you went out and you wanted to know what is happening, and you are doing an unbelievable job. You probably should become a professional investigator, and the two of you should work together.
Well, by the way, people don't know, but Lauren Lee actually has a real job on top of all this. We're very successful. Again, unlike myself, she has a real job. It's amazing.
Doing what?
She works in the tech industry. That's all I'm going to say. She's smart. She's
Thanks.
smart. That's all you need to know. So Verbal Judo writes, I need to educate myself about this case. Nancy writes, I'm next door in Massachusetts, love Rhode Island. You are your mom's angel, sending prayers for justice. Julie writes, inspirational.
Thank you.
And we talked about this a little bit, but Nancy says, also wondering about your mental health. I feel like thinking your mom died naturally, only to be thinking otherwise. Must be terrible thinking of you. Lauren, I was going to ask you, prior to all of this, when it was just your mom that passed away and you were a baby, did you visit your mom's gravesite? Were you interested in who she was, what she was all about? Or did it only really get triggered once this mysterious woman came into your life?
No, I grew up visiting her grave and not really knowing who she was, but always being interested in who she was. So, I kind of grieved that loss in a certain way, but I also sort of had these feelings of like, I'm missing something here. It's just this gut feeling. And then when that woman found me and started all of this, it was, there was a moment where I was like, wow, everything I knew was a lie. Sure. But at the same time, it was like, okay, this is cool. Now I can figure out what really happened and I can get to know my mom and I'm going to figure out these answers. So for me, I think it was almost therapeutic to go through this. And at the same time, I was also, just to repeat for those who didn't hear earlier, my adopted dad passed in 2019. So in 2020, I was still seeing a grief therapist for his death. So it kind of switched over to, hey, let's talk about this new case that has to do with my mom. Because, I figured, well, it hasn't hit me yet, but it's going to. And, the loss of any parent is such a huge foundational thing. So I really talked through it and I found new coping strategies. Exercise was huge for me to be able to process all of that, leaning on friends and family. So there were moments where certainly I grieved. I think you have to feel and process those emotions and not bury them and compartmentalize them. But overall, it's been really liberating and it's been gratifying to get to know my mom.
Beautiful.
Earlier or later, you can respond to that earlier request where the person asks, where could they find out more about you? And the way I went about it, I looked at Uncovered. And also there is the Unsolved Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And I have to confess that I failed with the TikTok. I tried my best.
Carm was a TikTok star for like a week. She was doing regular TikTok for a week. And then, by the way, my mom, I'm 53 years old, calls me screaming out of the blue the other day. How dare you not speak Spanish? You live in Miami. My wife speaks Spanish. You better learn Spanish. It keeps your brain sharp. And you're sitting here like cold case files up to your eyeballs, and now she wants me to learn Spanish. Now she'll get off and she'll say, "Look what Lauren's doing. She's figuring out, and you can't even learn Spanish." She's gonna say, but now that my mom stole my thunder, I like to plug everything at the end, and she likes to produce the show. uncovered what? Where do we go for that if people want to learn more about your mom and also Unsolved Rhode Island? What are the actual sites there?
Yeah, so if you go to unsolvedri.com, that's my website. I created, to start with my mom, but to also feature other local missing persons and cold case victims. And if you go to the cold case section, it links right to the Rhode Island map on Uncovered. Uncovered.com is the largest database of missing and unidentified persons and cold case victims across the United States. We're trying to map them all and build a really clear picture to hopefully get some of those solved and bring justice and peace and closure to families. My mom's case is on there. So if you look up Uncovered Lori Lee Malloy, you'll see it. It's marked as a suspicious death. Hopefully that will be updated in the near future to murdered as far as a classification goes. But if you just go to uncovered.com, you can find her case and many others.
By the way, Carm is so still during
that list? How many people are on that unresolved cases list approximately?
Over 200,000, but there's no accurate database at this point. So right now it's kind of the race is on to try and catalog as many as possible and get a better data picture.
Carm, I keep looking at you on this little monitor. You're so still. I think that I forgot to put you in the studio and that you're the cutout.
Oh, there's
usually a cutout here.
You need a Carm cutout.
There's usually pull the cutout, Carm. She'll fall off the chair. I keep thinking this is her, and I forgot to put.
That is brilliant.
Double Carm. Double Carm.
The funny thing was, I have to tell you.
It's before the Super Bowl, so we're having fun, even with a dark topic here a little bit. But
I went through a few sets.
Don't break yourself, Carmela.
I fell on the floor.
Hey, can I say something about your mama?
And on that one, my hair is like sticks out, so I kept with my own hair. I didn't realize it was.
We've become unhinged, but it's Super Bowl Sunday. We're having fun. Mac, what are you going to say about my mom?
I think there's.
I'm going to start. By the way, Carm says that humor is the key to solving or surviving tragedies.
No, amen. She's absolutely right.
I'm going to start calling you Mama. I like the way Mac says it. But Mac, what were you going to say?
Well, like I said, I had a chance to watch your mama speak, and she said the most incredible thing. And I think it goes right into the way I perceive Sled Dog's whole mentality about life. But your mama talked about, when her mama fled with her and the nuns took care of her, and then somebody put her on a train and took her back to her mama, and her mama had to get false documents to live. And all of this was happening, and it was horrible. And her daddy was murdered. And I mean, she had a lot of trauma back to back to back. At the end of it, though, she's talking about you. She's talking about her, 61 years of marriage. She's talking about the granddaughters. And she said, and this is a direct quote, a lot of miracles happened in our family. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Yep. So you can concentrate on this part of it, or you can concentrate on this part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, to me, what gravitated me towards Sled Dog is, I'm telling you, that child had a good time, y'all. Yeah. She traveled. She partied a little bit. She dated Pirate. Come on. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is a woman you would want to hang out with. You can't date Pirate and marry Scary and have this beautiful baby and not have some stories. Yeah. So I just think we should all.
Bright. She was very good student and very bright and beautiful.
Very, very. Yes. Yeah. I'm not allowed to say that in 2023, but she was very attractive. Very good looking woman.
But I just think we should all concentrate on all the miracles that have happened, and they're still happening. And they're coming, Lauren. They're coming.
Oh, yeah.
That is a great. Speaking of that, Anita writes, great picture of you and your mom.
Thank
Bunny you. Writes, this is to bring everyone up on the Super Bowl. Half my family was murdered in the Holocaust. My grandmother is the last survivor who survived. Carm, you have a special place in my heart. And then
totally undeserved because I didn't do it.
Bunny, I love you, because then she writes, and this channel has by far the best content, which is true. And guests. We do have the best guests, as you can see right now. We've got Lauren and Mac. I can tell Mac is awesome. The medical examiner, Anita, writes, she's reading about this as we speak and wants to know how and why did he get caught. Look at this. Our SPS Nation is so good. They're doing the research during the show.
That's
STS
awesome.
Nation is on the case. Yeah. So F. John Krolikowski, that little creep. So he got caught by the state back in, I want to say it was 1998. I found out about all of this through hearing it through the grapevine and then pulling newspaper archives. In 1998, 1999, around then, they discovered that he had misdiagnosed a number of cancer biopsies. So they went back and reviewed all of his work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. They missed my mom's case by like 2 months from the time when he was just a temporary fill-in for the chief medical examiner. Fast forward to the early 2000s, he was actually practicing in Alabama. He was sued. If you look up Krolikowski, Alabama lawsuit or something like that, he was sued by a family for allegedly taking this. This is like such Dr. Frankenstein stuff, for taking their loved one's brain after the autopsy and preserving it almost in like a resin in his office for his own personal use. And they never consented to that. And they sued him for it. And the lawsuit was eventually dismissed, not because he didn't do it. They found he did do it, but there was no harm that was caused because, of course, the person's already deceased. So malpractice doesn't really come into play. This is what he does. He goes from state to state to state. And, you know, eventually he gets caught. At this point, I want to say he's practicing in Maryland. So Maryland, look out. But he's still around.
Wow. Julie McCowan writes, I'm waiting on Carm's book. I'm glad you brought that up because now Lauren has reinvigorated me. Carm won't write it, but I've been working on a book, which I'm doing very slowly. But I want to take a poll. The book, do you guys remember there was a book called Tuesdays with Maury? It was written by Mitch Albom, and it was about a dying professor. My mother's not dying. Who was giving his last words of wisdom about different big subject areas. So that's what I'm kind of trying to do with Carm, get her take on marriage and kids and love. And would you guys read that?
I would pre-order that book today.
And it'll be called Surviving the Survivor with a little bit of humor in there. So,
right on.
Lauren Lee has reinvigorated and re-inspired me. I'm going to get cracking on that right after I eat some pizza and get
Love it.
During the Super Bowl. While Lauren is cycling. Lauren's making me look bad. She's cycling.
By the way, just to be fair, I think also Philadelphia will also win. Not only Kansas City.
It's possible.
What?
It's possible.
No, because I hate to set up people to lose. I think they will both win. It is a very special one.
And it could be a tie, Carm. Julie also writes, how can we support the guests? My mom, you can send her money. I'll take it. No, but for Lauren Lee Malloy, how can they support you, Lauren and Mac?
Oh gosh. I mean, for me, it's funny you ask about if there's any books in the works. I've been asked this a number of times. Mac and I have also talked about this. I'm going to write a book. It hasn't been the right time to start, but I think we're getting there. Certainly this year. So be on the lookout for it. For now, just, reshare a missing persons poster, go on to Uncovered, find a case that resonates with you and share it out to help raise awareness. Do something kind for somebody else. That supports me.
Bunny, writes, and have Carm read it on Audible, please. That's a guarantee.
Yes.
That's all the inspiration I need to get cracking again.
Please.
And Verbal Judo writes, Julie, you can get the word out by posting this live onto your social media accounts. That induces the channel algorithm, and it costs nothing. And it's like the Brady Bunch effect. The family grows, people see it. And you guys should all do that, not for me, but for Lauren Lee Malloy.
Thank you.
So Anita writes, I would also like to hear about Carm's experience. If you guys look, and we'll do it again, but Carm's story is posted. We did it one of the first episodes. Surviving the Survivor did not start out as a true crime podcast. Carm wanted to be like Joe Rogan, and we were talking to everyone.
This is totally not.
It's
not about me. The program is not about me. And, there is already an overdose of the Holocaust. Forget about the Holocaust. what happened was
Now you're gonna get
there
hate
was
mail.
COVID. I know I will get hate mail. There was COVID, and I was sitting in my apartment, and Joel was sitting with his 3 children and thinking how to escape. They are small children. And he said, "Do you want to do a podcast?" And I said, "What's a podcast?" And so we started our weekly things during the time when we were all locked in.
It's sort of like TikTok, but this lasted longer.
And he says to me, "Let's do one on the Holocaust." I said, "People are already in a state of depression. They don't need this. Let's do something upbeat." So I I suggested to tell people how I met Joel's father. And that's what we did for the first episode. And I enjoyed telling it. And I never thought.
And the
anybody
4th
would
or
watch
5th
it.
episode is Carm's story.
And I'm truly, I mean, I was working as a therapist, and I truly realized it's not about me. It's about you, Lauren. It's about your mom's life. And she was a very interesting woman also. I think almost before her time, because she wanted to take in life at its full. She, even in high school, she said she wanted to travel and have adventures, right? This was the life script she wrote for herself.
So, Carm, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Carm.
Today you are really into me.
What do you think? Either I'm too into you, not into you, and everyone, I can never win with you, Carm. Carm, what do you think happened on the day of March 7th, 1993? What do you think? What's your take?
I think somebody murdered her and walked out and left the door ajar.
A man or a woman?
I think since there was so much hair pulling, it's very possible it could have been a woman as well.
Interesting. See, Carm is like a detective. By the way, Patricia Burns with the best comment ever. Rogue Joel is better than Joe Rogan. I love it. Mac, you're the expert. You're the brilliant cold case investigator. Does Carm make a point there about the clumps of hair? That doesn't sound like it sounds something like a woman would do more so than a male.
It could be, unless he was dragging her around that apartment naked. It just seems really violent. A lot of domestic violence, they lose hair. Again, the money tree for me is those 2 glasses. You can start right there. The fact that they've already exhumed her, money tree, it's coming. If there's 2 DNA samples that they could get off that towel, they've got the evidence already that they need. They already have it.
By the way, how long do they keep the evidence?
In a homicide, they should keep it forever.
Forever.
So all the evidence that was collected is literally still sitting in a locker?
Should be.
I don't have 100% confirmation on what they still have, but I can say on the medical examiner side, what we know 100% for certain is they have all of the original histological specimens. That's, the skin samples that were taken, the blood samples that were taken. They also have the sexual assault kit that was taken, which was tested for blood typing, but never tested for DNA in 1993. So all of that still exists.
And Mac, do they, when they're doing the autopsy, do they clip the fingernails and put them in a bag? How does that work?
In the beginning, they should a little, and they should also scrape them, but I don't have a lot of confidence. Because
you were talking about the fact that they are going to maybe look under the fingernails, but
that's where I would start, basically. Because that's where it's going to be.
But that's what I'm asking. Do they keep the fingernails? Or are you saying once they exhume the body? When
they exhume the body, they're going to look under the fingernails. With the Boston Strangler, that's how we determined 100% it was Albert DeSalvo. We had DNA from the last victim, Mary Sullivan. When she was exhumed, there was DNA under her fingernails, and it matched Albert DeSalvo. So it's still there. The evidence is still there.
I don't want to get too morbid, but I'm kind of fascinated by this. When you exhume a body, how much of it is there without getting too crazily graphic?
More than you would think. There's going to be hair. There's going to be, potential tissue. There's going to be, again, evidence on the bones.
There's going to be tissue from 30 years?
There absolutely could be. Because keep in mind, you were embalmed, you were preserved, and then you were put in a airtight sealed container. So just like look at mummies. You can dig up mummies right now, and there's a whole lot of them left. You can see it.
Wow. Anita writes, it seems a guy would grab your neck before pulling your hair, but I guess Mac's saying that's not necessarily the case. Great point, Carm.
I think that he did both. I think she's right. But I'm saying if you grab somebody by the hair, let's say they're in the bedroom, which is where some of the evidence was, then there's more evidence and there's hair in the living room. Then there's more evidence and hair in the bathroom. Then there's evidence in the kitchen where he grabbed the bread or whoever. I'm saying this was a moving, traversing crime scene. And so sometimes if somebody's mad at you and they just grab your hair, because remember, she's naked. So he grabs her hair and he's pulling her, Cavemen got a reputation somehow, y'all.
Wow. That's a great one. She said caveman got a reputation, dragging people around.
But pulling people by the hair. But deep in your heart or in your mind, secretly, without revealing it to us, do you have a suspect that you are kind of leaning towards? And that suspect is still alive?
A couple of them. Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
like Joel would say, interesting.
That would drive me crazy. So the woman in the non-tortoiseshell glasses, that is Cheryl Mack McCullum, a crime analyst, college professor, author, and founder and director of the nonprofit Cold Case Investigative Research Institute based in Atlanta. Mac, how soon do you think we could get a break in this case, and what are you on the lookout for in the coming days, weeks, and months?
I think we could have something in the next month, late March, and I think it's very possibly suspect DNA. And I'm a working crime scene investigator still. I'm not retired yet.
Oh, wow.
So I'm still working.
And that's with Atlanta?
Metro Atlanta Police Department.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. How does that work? Are you on call? I mean, you have certain hours and then you're on call? Like if there's a homicide right now, do you have to go?
I would, absolutely.
You would, wow.
Yes. So I'm still on call, still actively work, but I do the other stuff, in my free time.
Can we ask a few questions from Mac? Because
it's your show, Carmen.
Mac, how did you, no, but it's unrelated to Lauren's situation. It's a broader question. How did you get involved in this? How did you decide to study this?
The short answer, my mama. She used to tell us fantastic stories when we were little. And one of the stories that she told, I was about 4 years old, and it was about Bonnie and Clyde. And I just became fascinated. And so I would always ask her to tell me about, different crimes. And she would. And she had a way of telling stories that would just captivate you. And so that's what I always wanted to do, was something involving something with crime.
Interesting. See, some people know from.
And now you're starting to say what I say, which is interesting. Yeah. Literally.
I picked it up now after all these years.
So, Lauren, we're going to wrap it up in a second, but Carm set a hard and fast rule on the podcast, which is we always have to ask our guests how we can help them. And I did that the very first time when she instituted that rule. It was with a guy named Dr. Avi Loeb, who's an astrophysicist at Harvard, and he asked us for $100 million for a telescope. That is an absolute true story, for a telescope. He was dead serious. He thought I could help him raise the money. I'm like, I don't know anyone. I barely know myself. Mac, they want to know, do you have your own YouTube channel before we get cracking?
I do not, but I have a podcast as of 8 weeks today. It's called Zone 7, if y'all want to check that out. And the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute is a nonprofit. So if you want to get involved with one of our cases, we need all the help we can get. So it doesn't matter what your vocation or avocation is, we'll take it.
What is the significance of Zone 7?
Zone 7 in Atlanta, there's 6 police zones. So back in the day, our Zone 7 would be our inner circle. Those people, very few, that you truly can trust and rely on and know they're going to tell you the truth and have your back and help you not get into trouble, get out of trouble, tell you the truth. that kind of person.
Very nice. Cool name. Cool name.
Thank you.
So Lauren, how do we help you? And I'll talk to you more about this off air, but how can we help you to get this story out there beyond what we're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, this has been awesome, so I really appreciate it. I think this will go far in raising awareness. I'm just asking folks to please keep sharing her Uncovered case page. So uncovered.com, you can look up Lori Lee Malloy on there, right on the case map. She's in Rhode Island. That's very helpful because that has a timeline, all the public media sources, and a summary, which I helped write myself from the original police reports. That's huge. And then I am not accepting donations. I don't need the money at this point in time, but for now, until we've got a fully functioning business model, I would say if you do want to make a contribution to the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute, as Mac said, they are a nonprofit, and that money goes directly towards helping victims like my mom.
And Terry writes, to wrap up a beautiful Super Bowl show.
Today you are really,
your mom is wonderful. Follow. It's not all you, Carm.
You know what happened? They were yelling at him that he's very impatient with me. And this week he's now on a campaign of charm.
My grandkid, her grandkids, my children call her the sloth. She doesn't move very quickly. But she's pretty nimble though, still at 83. Nancy writes, I'm wishing you all the best, Lauren, and we'll be keeping tabs on the case from across state lines and share to get the word out. Sure to get the word out, she means. So really appreciate you having both of you on. We're going to have both of you back for sure. And possibly my background is in journalism, so maybe we can get someone that we can hold accountable on this program, from the state of Rhode Island. Maybe go see how high up the flagpole we can go. Steve Cohen, my partner in crime on this, is the best at that. So we'll talk offline.
Awesome.
But we will keep the story alive and well. But in the meantime, we're going to be following the Alec Murdaugh trial all this week. And then Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, it'll be once again time for your True Crime Phil with the legendary detective Phil Waters. And then every Sunday now at 7 p.m., when we're not competing against the Super Bowl, you will have the live, not the cutout, but the live version of Carmela, my mother, my beautiful, darling, lovely mother here on set.
I'm going to
Love you, America.
Thank y'all so much.